join. Well, hello. Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. We've got a large contingent joining us, which is great, for our Thursday Unity Renowned Speaker Session. And today we've got Colin Smith, always a good crowd puller. Colin is here to talk to us today about committed development. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand you straight over to Colin.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope I find you well. Rupert asked me to talk specifically about retail changes of use to residential, and I put together an absolute masterpiece of a PowerPoint presentation for you all, and guess what? I accidentally deleted it. So literally about 3/4 of an hour or so, I cobbled together some slides, and we're going to take it to there. So I fully expect a lot of questions afterwards, so feel free if you want to ask me some questions and so on. That'd be great. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to share my screen and let's see how it goes. Right, so here we go. And then I've got to do full screen. There you go. Now, hopefully you can see the full screen there. Yes, Rupert?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Okay, that's fine. So, those of you probably have seen me speaking loads of times before, you know that one of my specialisms is actually permitted development. But as well as being a planning consultant, I like to teach and educate, but I also like to do the do myself. So I like to, if you like, walk the talk. I have been doing it for quite a long time now, and I think Rupert came to one of my planning workshops late last year, and yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And today we're just going to be talking about what can we do with permitted development, there's like 4 main points of what you can do, and I'm going to be talking about retail to flats. You can do office to resi. But the way that I present it is not just about converting to flats. I like to convert them to houses so that you get extra permitted development, and then turn them further into HMOs. So most guys who do their office to resi conversions, they just think about flats, but I like to take it a little step further. One of my specialisms that I particularly like is agricultural buildings, turning them into resi, but it's not just conversions, it's also all about changes of use. Because you can change the use only. You don't need to worry about building anything. And that creates something called a fallback position. And that enables you to create new sites. Also what I like to do, and I've done this myself a few times, is to use PD to extend an existing detached property. And then in turn go via a planning application to title split it or split it down the middle. So out of one detached property, you can make a pair of semis. So that's 3 quite powerful things you can do with PD. But like I say, today I'm going to be talking about retail to flats, mostly. Okay. Now I've got a little bit of a problem here because my Zoom menu is actually covering my slides for some reason. So I'm just going to try and move that. Right, thanks. So there are 2 basic methods by which you can change the use of a retail unit to residential, and that's really what we're all about. At the moment, I think that retail is under quite a siege right now, what with the looming possible recession. I hope there's not going to be a recession, but due to the old virus and the lockdown, that's affecting things quite dramatically. And the fact that online retail, you know, the likes of Amazon and so forth, they're quite damaging retail units, retail business. So therefore, when you look on your commercial pages of your agents' websites, you'll see lots and lots of shops actually, you know, either the leases or the freeholds or whatever actually up for grabs. So it could be useful to know how you can convert those to residential and bring some life back into the locality. So like I say, there's 2 ways of doing that. You've got Class M, and you've got Class G. Now, Class M is a prior notification application, and you can change up to 150 square metres of retail space to residential with that. You can also change professional services as well. And strangely, you can change a betting office and a payday loan shop and also a laundrette of all things. And you can change up to 150 square metres of that. That's quite a big laundrette, I have to say, but that's what you're allowed to do. And like I say, it is a prior notification application. Now, one thing that people sometimes get mixed up with is that when you make these applications, you're not actually making a planning application. Permitted development is already approved as a planning application, and it's already been granted. When you have a prior notification application, what that actually is almost like a pre-commencement condition. So in other words, yes, you can get on with it as long as you comply with the various conditions. Now, Class M is a prior notification application, so therefore there are various things that you've got to do to comply with that. But Class G, very usefully, is not. In actual fact, you can get on with Class G straight away as long as you are absolutely sure that you comply with it. And I'm going to show you how you can combine those two permitted development classes to change retail to resi. And Class G, as it says there on the slide, it changes a retail building into a mixed use of one retail unit and two flats. So that means that for every retail unit you have, you can create two flats from it. So let's crack on with that. So there's the two basic methods. Now, Class M, like I say, it is a prior notification application, and it's very useful. There are some rules that you've got to abide by. And one of the most important rules is that there's a timestamp on it. So it had to be in use or prior to this date in use on the 20th of March 2013. It doesn't have to be in current use, but there shouldn't have been a change of use in between, if you see what I mean. So as long as you were as a retail or a professional services use on that date or prior to that date, then you're good to go. Now, the next thing which is tricky, and that is you can't use it in a conservation area or in a listed building. And I'll go on to that in a second. The other things that can trip you up are that they'll be in the local authority when they're looking to approve the conditions. They'll be looking to see what the impacts are on the highways and transport. That means parking and things like that. There is a degree of contamination. For instance, if you're having to dig up the ground for some reason, like putting in services. And there's also a degree of flood risk as well. They're worried about you basically having a flood on the ground floor if you've got some sleeping accommodation, let's say, for example. And last but not least, they're worried about how the removal of a retail unit would have as an impact on local shopping services. So therefore, key shopping areas like a high street, you probably won't get away with it. And also, if you are in a more rural location and there's only one shop around for miles and you're proposing to take it away, then that might also be a problem. So Class M is very useful, it has its place, but there are things that can trip you up on that. So let's just go to the next slide. Okay, now, so Class M, bearing in mind all the things that can trip you up, when you're looking at your retail to residential opportunity, do you think you can do it there? Well, probably not. The right-hand slide there, you can see that looks pretty historical, probably listed, more than likely in a conservation area. So therefore, straight away, you'll think, well, really, I can't use Class M there. And similarly, with the left-hand side, it's obviously a high street location. And again, it could be quite difficult to get a Class M approval in that location there. So then I go to the next slide now. Now, would you think these two examples would be ideal candidates for Class M? Well, again, probably yes. But on the other hand, if they're the only village shop around for miles and miles, then again, you might have a little bit of a problem. So how do you get over these things? So here's a quick example of how you might get over a Class M. Well, obviously, you can't be using it in a conservation area. You can't really use it in a high street location and so forth. But one way that you can get over the other impacts is only convert a part of it. So therefore, on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see that that's probably what the layout looks like currently. And then what you're hoping to do with it is to convert it obviously into a flat if you can, but you retain the front part while converting the rear part. Now, you're not just confined to converting the ground floor, you can also do the upper floors as well. But there's another catch here, and that is the whole building must be in retail or professional services use. And that is very important. Sometimes you might have flats above and might have one flat above because you can then convert the whole roof space. You might be able to get another flat up there as well. But can you see on the right hand side that there's actually a separate little entrance there, which might lead yourself to think, well, in actual fact, the upper floors are not part of the original use. For example, might not be a manager's flat or something. And there is a little way around that, which I'll get to in a second. Now, let's just quickly jump to Class G, and let's look at all the advantages over Class M that G has for you. First of all, again, you can change an A1, which is retail, or an A2, which is professional services. Professional services include things like estate agents and solicitors, whereby you have like a walk-in service, that sort of thing. But very importantly, whereas with Class M, I'll just rewind this a little bit, with Class M, you had a date stamp, okay? You couldn't do it in a conservation area, you couldn't do it with a listed building. You've got problems like transport and highways, contamination, flood risk, and also how it would affect local shopping services. I'll just go forward again. With good old Class G, which is very, very powerful if you do it correctly, there is no timestamp. So irrespective of when that particular unit came into use as a shop or professional services, then it doesn't matter. Next, it can be done in a conservation area, okay? And it can be done with a listed building. You will need separate listed building consent, mind you, but you can still do the change of use to a listed building. We don't have to worry about transport or highways. There's no parking issues. We're not interested in contamination or flood risk, and we're not worried about the impact on the shopping. Now, the important thing here is that you can't do it on a ground floor if there's a display window. Now, if you look at your high street, obviously there's display windows there, so therefore you can't convert the ground floor. But I'll show you a way around that in just a second. Can you do it here? Yes, you can. Again, you can convert the top floors, and you can do these top floors here as well, the right-hand slide and the left-hand slide. But most importantly is that there's actually no planning application or application required with Class G, which is very, very powerful indeed. I always advocate to people to get a lawful development certificate to say that what you're doing is actually lawful, but there's no interference from the local authority as long as you comply with the various conditions and limitations of that Class G. So now let's have a quick look at how we can combine these two. So let's say, for example, you are in a conservation area and you have all the other problems to get over. You can use Class G on the top floor. That means for every retail unit that you have, you can put two residential units, flats above it, and then you can then convert the ground floor as long as you retain the front of the shop unit, and that will enable you to, with Class M, to actually convert the bottom there. And there's an interesting thing here. which is a little bit of a loophole and maybe a little bit difficult to get your head round. But Class G is all about creating a mixed use. So in effect, you have a retail use and then two flats above it. So in effect, there are three, what they call planning units. There's three entities there. Now, that means that if you change the use of one of those entities, then the PD rights in effect roll over into the next use. So if you do the timing of this correctly, it's entirely possible to change the use of the ground floor and then possibly get, depending on the situation, to get further uses at the back. Then another way around it is that because you can't have display windows on the ground floor and change it to a flat, it is in fact possible to get permission to change to, say, professional services, whereby, say, for example, solicitors, where you wouldn't necessarily have a display window. So therefore, you could retain the unit, as I said, and convert the back. So what I'm leading up to say, essentially, is that you can combine the Class M and the Class G in the right order and use the planning units that are created correctly. And then you can take a unit like this, where you possibly couldn't normally convert it, but by combining both of those elements, you could. So you can convert that sort, you can convert that sort, and then, like I say, a mismatch of both of those. So I did have a little bit of a problem with my slides, as I said earlier, so I'm rather sort of ad-libbing this as I go. So I do welcome any questions that you've got after this. But before I wind up, I'm just going to be talking about, with prior notification, so we're talking about Class M in particular, the things that we've got to watch out for is whether it's listed, and I think I'm happy to share these slides with you. But there is a link on there to Historic England, which will tell you whether the building's actually listed or not. Conservation areas, you can get the conservation areas from the local authority. They have development plans that show the conservation areas on there. There is a government website which tells you all about flood risk, to be able to tell you whether your building is in a flood zone or not. Do be aware of noise surveys. In other words, if you've got a noisy environment like a high street, railways, motorways, schools, and that sort of thing, you have to be careful of that. And also you've got your traffic and parking impacts as well. Now, very lastly, with a prior notification like Class M, this doesn't apply to Class G, it's just Class M, then there's something called the 56-day rule applies. And that means that if the local authority haven't informed you that your application is either invalid or it doesn't comply with those conditions, then you get your permission by default if they don't tell you within 56 days. Actually, it's 58 days because it's 56 plus 1 day, plus allow them 1 day to actually write to you. But that's a very useful little tip. So it's quite a quick presentation, this. I do invite any questions that you've got. And I'm sorry that it was a bit quick, but like I say, I had a bit of a disaster with my slides. So if you want to get in contact with me, there are my contact details. If you've got any questions, then happy to answer those. And I'll just stop sharing my screen now and then take it from there. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Colin. Thanks very much. And we've got a few questions coming in now, so that's good. And with regard to sharing the slideshow, I will email out to everybody that's here today. I will send them by email.
And what I'll do, I'll send out the correct slides, because like I say, I was ad-libbing it a little bit there, and they'll make a bit more sense.
Okay, so as soon as I've got those from you, Colin, I'll be sending those out to everybody.
Thank you.
That's where you're going to get the slides. They'll be, look out for your emails inbox there. So just going through some of the questions here, we've got Colin Cameron has said, would these not be A1 to A2 use class? So do we need to change to Class M first before submitting prior approval? Now, is that confusing change of use classes with actual usage classes.
Yes, yeah, it does actually,
Yeah.
because I remember we had this once before when we did the workshop.
Yeah.
There was permitted development has classes of development, but at the same time, a use class which describes the uses of a particular unit. They also have classes. So, for example, class A1 is a use class for retail, and then class M or class G is a class of permitted development. So yes, it can get a bit confusing.
Hugely confusing.
Incidentally, A1 and A2 are actually interchangeable,
Yeah.
and you don't need to have specific approval to change those uses. And again, it all depends on which order is applicable to your project, that you can use class G and class M. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, the actual use classes are listed on the planning portal, and unfortunately they don't use a different term
No,
for the descriptors of permitted development, so they call them classes and they give them letters like M. So
yeah,
if it's got a number and a letter, it's normally what you're actually starting with or ending with, but if it's just a letter, it's the transition.
that
Am I
that's
right there?
that's pretty good. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, good. So Alan Wright says, agriculture would be of interest as well if you get time, more info on Unity. Thanks for
I've
that
actually got
feedback,
proper
Alan. Yeah,
slides on that.
yeah. We'll certainly take that one on board.
Thank you.
Pip Knight, what's the definition of a display window versus a normal window? Good question, Pip.
That is a good question, and just like most things in planning, there's no actual definitive description. They have to take the common man approach as to what is a display window. So as long as it's not obscured, as long as it's not too high, and you can actually display something in it, in other words, goods to be displayed, that is a display window. So one way around of not having a display window, which I sort of mentioned, is that you could have, for example, opaque glass or something like that, where obviously you're not displaying your wares, as it were, and just maybe have some opening top lights on the window for ventilation purposes. So that is one way around it. There is a court case, I think it was Cornwall versus the Secretary of State, I think it was, and they actually defined what a display window was there, but not in planning legislation, unfortunately.
Okay,
There is a way around it.
the next question, Colin, I think we've covered from Joe. So more people rightly, and don't feel bad about this because I certainly did, getting confused with the transition classes, the permitted development classes, which
Yeah.
is describing the transition between one planning to another planning class, and the actual planning classes themselves. So this question, class M or class G, how to find out which class is the building. Estate agents usually only know that it's A1 or B1, not M or G.
Yeah, as a little add-on to that, I did a little presentation which was just for people to understand the basics of permitted development, what it's all about, what the three types of permitted development actually are. So if there's enough interest in that, then I can spend a lot longer, at least half an hour, 40 minutes, and give everybody a 101 on exactly what permitted development is, and and all the different things that you can use for it. And that is very useful for your newbies, let's say.
Yeah, fantastic. And Colin used to be ever present at our physical meetings when we could have them, and would always do a 15-minute update or so, and then be mobbed during the lengthy breaks that we'd have as well, didn't you? So yeah, we'll have you back for that certainly, Colin, and we'll do some more of the renowned speaker sessions in the future. So can we split a single retail unit into two retail units, then create two flats above each retail unit?
Yeah, you certainly can. You certainly can. There's no physical limit to how many units. The legislation says that, unlike when you split a house into flats, you need specific permission to do that, okay? But to split any other use class, like retail, professional services, you don't need permission to do that. it's not thought of as being development as such, therefore planning permission is not required. And for every unit you create, you can have 2 flats above. And I do another presentation, which is about how you can convert pubs to residential. And we do exactly that. We turn a pub, we have a little trick that we use, and then from there we can turn it into flats.
So what about the physical restrictions? Does each ground floor unit need to have a staircase going up?
No, there's no physical restrictions. There's a practical restriction, and I believe there's a refinancing restriction. Like with residential, I think you can't really have flats less than 30 square meters for refinancing purposes. And I think that's the same with commercial refinance as well. So there's a practical restriction, but not a planning one.
So how would you then just simply vertically split them? I mean, do you need to do anything physically, or do you just do it on a piece of paper?
You do it on a piece of paper as an exercise.
Yeah.
Whenever you make these different stages, I always advise you to get a lawful development certificate to say that what you're doing is actually allowed. Very important distinction here though, and that is that a lawful development certificate, I call them an LDC, is not a planning permission. It's a bit like getting an MOT on your car. It says that you are lawful to drive on the road, but it doesn't necessarily make you allowed to drive on the road, if you see what I mean. It's almost like a little snapshot in time that says that what you're trying to do is in fact lawful. So whenever you do all these little convoluted steps, I always advocate getting a lawful development certificate, because at some stage, somebody like a conveyancer or solicitor or something may ask the awkward question of, how did you do this? And then at least you can prove what you actually did. And it's not as daunting as it sounds. Basically, it's quite a simple process just to ask whether what you're doing is correct. And then the council, hopefully, will come back and say, yes, you're quite right, carry on.
Brilliant. And from Sarah, assumed you would need to provide a sink toilet facilities in a shop. Are you okay with that question, or should we bring Sarah into us?
Do you need it? Not for planning purposes.
Right.
Not for planning purposes, no.
Just going to unmute you for a minute, Sarah. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I just assumed that for staff, at least you'd have to provide sink and toilets.
Well, you do, but not in planning terms.
Right.
So that's more like a health and safety, environmental type of thing, probably, but not for planning permission purposes.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So moving on, we've got Philip with the 150 square metre on Class M. Can this be used for more than one unit?
Yes, it can. There's no limitation on how many units. I don't advocate creating rabbit hutches, but a decent sized flat is about 40, 50 square metres. So in theory, that's at least 3 flats, which means you could have 2 upstairs, 1 downstairs, and then leave a bit of shop if there's more space available. So it's quite flexible in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And from Joe, how to make sure that flat office is suitable for conversion, brackets end and uppers, before buying the property. Can you just ask the council planning department, or is there some formal process?
Do you mean in planning terms or physical building terms?
Let's see if we can find Joe. Are you able to? I'm just unmuting you now, Joe. Joe, can we hear you?
Speak to me, Joe.
I think you're going to have to take your choice there, Colin.
Well, all it needs to do from a planning point of view is to meet the various conditions and limitations of that permitted development class. So as long as you can tick the right boxes, then you're good to go. If you need prior notification, like the Class M, then you need to be able to satisfy those conditions. But the permission itself has already been granted. It's just been subject to you meeting those conditions. With Class G, it's even easier. You don't need to make an application at all, but I do advocate getting an LDC.
And a good one from Vinny, because it crossed my mind also. Hi guys, what's it about the highway that we need to be aware of to fulfill this criteria?
Whether or not there could be a parking impact. Some high streets and so on have like parking zones, especially in the cities and so forth. That's mainly it. Funny enough, parking is one of the least that you need to worry about with retail, because most people are travelling on foot anyway. When you convert office to resi, that's usually when parking and so forth and highways impacts is more important. But in my experience, I've never had a problem with parking. It's just one of those things that you do need to tick. It's more about the impact of removing a shop from the high street and the facility of shopping, whether it reduces that facility in some way. That's probably the main reason why Class M's get refused, I would say. It's when, you know, the local authority have local policies as well, which don't affect us with permitted development, but they do try and preserve your retail. So anything that takes away retail, they try and protect it. And one of the ways is say, well, you're taking away a shop, well, what are you going to replace it with? And that's the sort of argument you can get in with. Like I say, that's probably, in my experience, the #1 reason why a Class M application gets refused.
Mm-hmm. And from Philip, I'm going to bring Philip in because I'm not fully understanding. He said, with long ground floor shots, how have you dealt with light issues? So I'm assuming that means that we're going to put the residential on the ground floor, but I'll just bring him in here. Hi, Philip. Can we hear you?
No.
No, we can't hear
Well,
you.
I can answer that because once again, lighting is not a consideration. There was quite a high profile case fairly recently, maybe a month or so, maybe 2 months ago, whereby this was an office to residential conversion. Some of the flats that were being created actually had no windows, but they did have mechanical ventilation, and they did have, you know, I think they call them sun pipe windows. They didn't actually have open windows to give any form of outlook. And although that isn't great, obviously, it's not a consideration under permitted development. And that's exactly the same with Class M for retail or Class G. So I don't advocate it, but there's nothing in the legislation from a planning point of view that says that you must have natural light or window.
No, that's fantastic. And Dave has asked, and I think you may have answered this already, but Dave says, I read somewhere, probably in Unity, Dave, or probably that Colin had written, that you can use PD to split a large shop into 2, 3, stroke 4 vertically. Could you then use Class G to put 2 flats above each new vertical unit? How complete does the split have to be before you add the flats above it?
Exactly right, you can do that. We covered that just a minute ago. There is no physical limitation, but there's a practical limitation to how small it can go. One of those practical limitations is refinancing.
Yeah, and obviously the space, you know, making sure that you've got the right amount of space. 30 square meters is absolutely the minimum.
Yeah,
you know,
which is about the size of a double garage, roughly.
Yeah. So from Mandy, as you're converting use classes triggers valuation office, I believe, as you stated, you're mostly into HMOs. Have yours been individually banded, or have you got another trick? Okay.
That is down to local authorities, actually. They're quite sneaky. I've heard of individual rooms being banded at class, is it grade A, class A, whatever they call it? You know, and other local authorities don't do that. Once again, this isn't a planning permission or permitted development query, because it has no impact on it. But when you are doing it for real for yourself, then I do say that you ought to investigate with your local authority and find out what the council tax situation is.
And we are going off on a bit of a limb away from planning there, Mandy, but I have heard of a little trick, call it a trick. It's also the outcome of normality as well in some cases, is where you have all the tenants who are on one particular AST And as a result of that, the actual room unit isn't specific to that tenant. So the tenants choose themselves as to which bedrooms that they're in. They can change the bedrooms at will if they want to, and then they just share the communal space as well. And legally, that would enable or prevent the valuation officer from individually banding those rooms. I don't know a great deal of detail on that, but that's the summary of the trick.
To put it into a nutshell, what that is to do with is households. Yeah. So if you've got one household, which is basically one AST, think student let, okay, one household, one AST, everybody's jointly, severally responsible for each other, and therefore there should only be one council tax bill. But with an HMO, in theory, you could all live behind locked doors and never see each other, although you're supposed to share facilities. And therefore, in that particular instance, local authorities are prone to council tax each room individually. So it's a difference between a multiple occupation or a household. I think that's what it comes down to.
Absolutely. And the other thing to remember on this subject, and I know we're off on a limb here, is that the individual banded room means that the liability for council tax falls upon the tenant and not upon the landlord. Now, I do appreciate that there's an indirect impact on demand and on the landlord as a result of that. But in some cases, particularly in cases where you might have benefit tenants in the property, it actually could be in your interest that the rooms are individually banded, because the tenants are then liable, as opposed to you, the landlord, for the council tax. And of course, the government would be paying that council tax via the benefits system. So it really does depend on your tenant type and your situation as to whether individual banding could actually work in your favour or not. So moving on, Colin Cameron, I'd be interested in finding out more about converting pubs into flats. I've seen a building that is closed, a closed bar on the ground floor. You've seen a closed bar, Colin?
I haven't seen a bar in about 3 months.
and a nightclub on the second floor. But I didn't think I could do anything with it. Clearly, if you know what you're doing, you can. So just in general, can you do anything with that, Colin?
Yes. How long have you got?
Okay.
It's a 2, maybe 3-step process. And if you invite me back, I'll explain it.
All right, we'll go for that. And Christian Hartley said hello to you and given you a little wink, and that's all we've got there. So you can wink back there. So we've got Philip again. Are they normally done in a particular order, i.e. M and then G? And apologies for lack of microphone.
Okay. Yes, they are done in a particular order, depending on what the restrictions are. Generally speaking, but not always, but I would say probably 8 times out of 10, something like that, we start with G first, followed by M. So in other words, you use up all your flexibility of your use classes on G, because we know it's much easier to get, because there's no actual application as such. And then we follow that up with a Class M application, which is the prior notification. Notification. So that's how it works generally, but not always. Sometimes different cases needs different ways of attacking it. But generally speaking, Class G followed by Class M.
Yeah, good. And Mandy's trying to answer an earlier question, mentioned the light tunnel, which is basically you look up at the ceiling from the ground floor and there might be a circle or a square there that's bringing light all the way in from the very top of the building, and it just basically is a tube that goes vertically all the way up through the roof there. So that's an option there for light. Christian Hartley, any restrictions on going up on existing 2 floors over a bank ground floor? I'm going to have to read that again. Any restriction on going up on existing 2 floors over a bank ground floor? Do you get that, or do we need to bring him in? Christian.
Yeah, okay. So you've got a bank. You've got a bank, and in effect, what you're wanting to do is to convert the roof space?
Yeah, you've got a bank on the ground floor, Colin, and then you've got 2 floors above, which have been in the past used for office space. It's quite a modern kind of commercial mid-1960s, concrete floors, brick facade, flat roof, probably rubber, and kind
So,
of.
so the roof space doesn't exist yet.
No, well, no. There's just a bank on the ground floor, then the two floors above, which
But it's got a flat roof, not a pitch roof.
got a flat roof, and then the ones to the side of it are like big 5-story Victorian terraces.
Okay. The key thing is that the whole building that is the subject of the permitted development application,
Yeah.
the whole building needs to be that particular use class. Now, a bank is professional services, which is Class A2. So that means you can use Class M and Class G on a bank. The things with banks, though, they tend to be very old type buildings, probably listed, more likely in a conservation area, which usually means you can only use Class G. But it only allows you to change the use of the volume of the building. It doesn't give you any rights to actually make the building any bigger.
It's quite a modern building, Colin, probably about mid-60s.
Okay.
And
So,
I can't see the bank being there much longer. I reckon another 9 months and they'll be gone.
very quick answer to that then. If you PM me, send me some details. It'll probably take me about 10 minutes to look at it and give you a proper answer.
No, that's fantastic, Colin. Thanks for that.
That's
And
great.
the other person that you might want to talk to is Andrew Roberts, who has bought a bank, and actually he used to even work as an employee in that bank before he came out and became full-time in property. And he's gone back and bought the building and has done some conversions to that as well. So you might want to compare notes with Andrew on that. You mentioned just now, Christian, that either side of that bank is 5-story buildings, and this one is only 2 floors above the ground. So, any news on those airspace rights, or?
I wish I had £1 for every time I've been asked that. I'll have at least a fiver by now. I think that it's going to be rolled out towards the end of this year, quite honestly. The government had Brexit on their mind to start off with, and now they've got the lockdown on their minds. So they're not really thinking about permitted development rights just now. But just to explain really quickly what the likelihood is, they will take the average of the 2 adjacent buildings up to a maximum of 5 stories. So, and it's going to be rolled out initially just on blocks of flats, I believe. So if you've got a 7-story building on one side, you're 2 stories, and then there's a 3-story on the other side. 7 plus 3 divided by 2 gives you the average of 5. That means on your 3-story building, you can add another 2 stories on top. If that makes sense.
So basically, you can still go up as long as one side is above you. But if the other side is below or the same, you can still go up, depending on...
Up to a maximum of 5, yeah.
It's an end of terrace, the one I'm looking at, so that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks for the question. That's great, Christian.
Thank you.
So, Philip, can the local authority extend the 56 days on the prior notification?
Yes, they can. I had this beginning of the week. A local authority, I was doing a QA application for converting a barn, just a change of use to resi. And it's normally, as you say, a 56-day determination period from the day that they received it, not the day that they validate it, which is a very important distinction. And because of the lockdown and so on, they actually are, this is North Norfolk Council, by the way, they actually asked for a 4-month extension of time. And I did laugh. Then they then started to ask me, would you to agree to it? And I basically said, well, if you're likely to refuse it, then what's the point of me, agreeing to an extension of time in the first place? So basically, as long as you don't agree to it, it's fine. But the minute that you agree to it, then whatever that date that you've agreed, that becomes your determination date. But do be aware, because local authorities like to pull that one over you.
Right, okay. And from Mario, this is one that you probably know about more than we do. Hi, Colin. As you know, we've been up against PD for the last 2 years, which
Yeah.
the PD for the upper floor for 3 flats. I don't know if that's just telling you what he's got or whether that's a question.
Yeah, no, we worked together for about 2.5 years now, I think.
Yeah.
Hi, Mario.
Yeah, excellent. And Joe, can you get from the council LDC before purchasing the property, or do you have to be the owner to apply for it? Well, I can answer that one because Colin got an LDC for me before I purchased the property last June. So,
Okay.
but obviously, let's hear it from Colin.
Well, no, that's spot on, and the same thing with planning applications and prior notification applications. You don't need to be the actual owner of the property to apply. The downside to that is that if you are successful and you get the permissions that you're wanting, then the permission runs with the property and not the person. So therefore, the property gets the benefit of the permission. And if the vendor then decides not to sell to you, they obviously get the benefit of the permission for the resale. So always protect yourself. If wherever you can, do an offer subject to planning and so on, if you can, because the permission runs with the building or the property and not the person.
Yeah, or exchange contracts with the completion.
Yeah, exchange for £1 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And just in case other people are confused, LDC, lawful development certificate,
Yep.
certificate of lawful development will be a CLD.
Yeah, I know.
And I've heard other words being used, and
Yeah.
I don't think there is an official word, is there? I think
The one I've always used is LDC.
yeah, lawful
I've always,
development.
and people tend to understand that when you're talking shop.
Okay, but you will see different acronyms there on different.
Yeah, certificate of lawful proposed use, existing use, and so on and so on and so on.
Exactly. Good question from Colin Cameron here. Is the community infrastructure levy ever used on permitted developments?
Yes, it does, and it can do.
Yeah.
Do be careful about that. It's about the net increase, though. So not just that you don't get it on the change of use, but if you make the building any bigger, then you will suffer that tax. There is the 6 in 36 rule, which I can never remember exactly, of the past use. That can be an exemption to you. But the SIL laws, all you need to do is actually Google SIL regulations, and then it's quite a long thing to read, but it's all quite easily explained on there. But yes, it is.
So I do understand that SIL is the net increase in space created.
Yeah.
And does that cover upper floors as well, or is it just the footprint?
It's the physical building size, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So all the floors are included.
Yeah, but do check that.
And I have heard, just talking about SIL there, Colin, and you'll help me with this, but I have heard situations where, you know, if there's an old shed or an old garage that is either sort of demolished with still the floor down, the concrete floor down, or semi-demolished or whatever, you can, you know, potentially include that in the starting size and reduce the amount of SIL that you pay.
Yeah, if you can actually prove what the starting gross, or I think it's gross internal area.
Yeah.
If you actually establish what that is at the outset, fill out, I think it's form number 5 of the SIL regulations, I think it is.
Yeah.
And that gives you the starting point. But whatever you do make sure that you fill out the forms before, and make sure the local authority have got them before you actually start the physical development. So before you start stacking bricks or whatever, or changing the use, make sure you've got all your SIL compliance in place, because it can come up and bite you.
That's fantastic. Well, we've come to the end of the questions, and what I think is great about this session is probably more than this session, more than half of this session has been taken up with questions, and I find that that's always that always really shows the value of having you here.
Thank you.
So that's fantastic, and yes, I'm sure that if you would, Colin, come back again, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, you could do a poll if you wanted to, of the sort of things that you wanted me to talk about.
Well, that's a good idea. We'll do that on the group, on the Facebook group.
But like I say, I do apologise for the quality of the slides. I had a bit of a disaster before I started, so I had to ad-lib it.
Okay, so just we've had one sneak in at the end by Joe. If you create flat under PD rights, do you have to follow minimum flat size set up by the council?
No.
Okay.
That's the end of that.
Well, what a great word to end on there. But yes, I'll get the presentation sent out as soon as I've received it. That will come to you by email.
Thank you. Yeah.
Keep an eye out on the Unity Facebook group for more information about our renowned speaker dates, our cafes, and everything else that we do. And some words of thanks coming through as well on the chat. So
you're very welcome. Thank you very much.
We'll end that now. Thanks very
Lovely
much.
to meet you all.
Oh, just a final word to everybody before you go. This session has been recorded and will be available on the Unity YouTube channel if you want to watch it again in the future. Okay, goodbye all.
Thank you very much.